Well, we have officially come to the end of an era, something that's been going on for 19 years. I mean, we still have New Mutants coming out next year, supposedly, but, yeah, this is more the end of an era than anything, really. Hey everyone, it's Alex the Real Mr. Robinson, and this is my review for Dark Phoenix, which is the fourth X-Men movie in this reboot prequel series, the seventh X-Men movie overall, not counting the Wolverine or Deadpool solo movies, and the final X-Men movie to be released by Fox before they get rebooted in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So this movie is an adaptation of the Dark Phoenix saga, which they tried to do in X-Men The Last Stand, and that didn't work out too well, although I will say about this movie, at least the Dark Phoenix saga is the main focus and doesn't feel like an afterthought. So the movie takes place in the early 90s. Society has accepted mutants, accepted the X-Men, and now they're doing a bunch of missions for the United States, pretty much. On a space mission to rescue some astronauts from a damaged shuttle, Jean Grey unfortunately gets exposed by a massive solar flare, but she survives and acquires these new powers that, whenever she loses control, she becomes one of, if not the most powerful mutant alive. So this power unfortunately puts the X-Men and all of mutant kind in danger, and attracts the attention of Jessica Chastain, who plays a character that takes a real interest in Jean Grey now that she has these powers. So this is the directorial debut of Simon Kinberg, who's mostly known as a writer, and while he's been attached to a lot of geek stuff, he's no stranger to the X-Men series. He did write X-Men The Last Stand, which I don't hate that movie, but it's not good. But he also wrote my favorite X-Men movie, Days of Future Past, and then he went on to go and write X-Men Apocalypse, and the 2015 Fantastic Four. So he's definitely had a lot of misses. But with Dark Phoenix, this is not only Fox's second attempt to adapt the Dark Phoenix saga, but his as well. And there's a lot of problems with this movie. For it being the final X-Men movie that Fox is going to release, this is not the way I hoped it would go out. Obviously, this movie has gone through so much production hell. It was supposed to come out last year, but got delayed. It got delayed again. They had to spend millions of dollars on reshoots. Word of mouth before the movie came out said that it was as bad as X-Men The Last Stand, which, again, I don't hate that movie, so that doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. So I will say that coming out of this movie, I didn't think it was as bad as I was led to believe. It's not even terrible, but it's just so average. Like, with this movie and X-Men Apocalypse, I'm so disappointed that the X-Men series has gone down this route, because the point of Days of Future Past was to fix everything and send the X-Men series in a great new direction, and instead it's just gone to hell, pretty much. Another problem really has to do with the fact that you can't do the Dark Phoenix saga this early. Yes, this is the seventh X-Men movie technically, and they have been making these movies since 2000, but if this was the seventh movie in a series that was continuous and had the same cast, then it'd be okay to do the Dark Phoenix saga. But for it being the fourth movie in this prequel reboot series, and only the second one to feature Sophie Turner as Jean Grey, who was barely a character in X-Men Apocalypse, that was just way too soon. Like, you need time in order to do the Dark Phoenix saga, because it's one of the most iconic X-Men stories out there. This and Days of Future Past were written by Chris Claremont, and in terms of the movie Days of Future Past, I think that worked out tremendously, even with its differences. This one, not so much. When it comes to Sophie Turner as Jean Grey, I actually defended her in X-Men Apocalypse. She didn't have much to do in that movie, but she looks the part, and I think if you gave her some good material that she could deliver as Jean Grey. But unfortunately with this movie, I mean, like I said beforehand, we barely know her as Jean Grey. So for this movie to just adapt Dark Phoenix right away and put her in this situation, it doesn't really lead to any emotional beats because, again, we barely know her as Jean Grey without the Dark Phoenix powers. And the rest of the cast that debuted in Apocalypse doesn't get a lot to do. Tye Sheridan as Scott Summers just doesn't work for me in this movie. And then you have Alexandra Shipp as Storm, who I really loved in Love, Simon. And at the very least, they got her African accent down at long last after how many movies with the Storm character? 5, not counting this one. So, I mean, at least there's that, but her character doesn't have that much to do. And there are a lot of scenes in this movie where I go, I'm pretty sure that's not how Storm's powers work, Simon. Nightcrawler doesn't really do that much in this movie. In terms of the cast members who have been around since First Class and Days of Future Past, they're really a mixed bag. The best one for me is still James McAvoy as Professor X, Charles Xavier, because he still manages to maintain the spirit of Charles Xavier, who wants to help Jean Grey, wants to defend mutant kind. And there are a lot of moments in this movie where they put this character in situations where he could possibly be a villain. I don't think they all worked out too well, but at least it's nice to get some complexity. Outside of that, Jennifer Lawrence was sleepwalking through this movie as Mystique. Michael Fassbender was good again as Eric Lehnsherr / Magneto, but I felt he was pointless in this movie. He had no purpose to be in this story. And then they don't do anything with Quicksilver. He gets a few cool moments here and there, but not as much as in Days of Future Past or even Apocalypse. And yeah, there were points where I even forgot he was in the movie. There are a lot of moments in this movie that are just totally half-assed. One of them is with the villain Jessica Chastain, who doesn't even have a name. I don't know how much of her character has been publicized, so I'm not going to say too much. I will say that in addition to having no name, she's terrible in this movie. And Jessica Chastain is a very talented actress. She's an Academy Award nominated actress. I feel like she should have won the Oscar for Zero Dark 30 over Jennifer Lawrence for Silver Linings Playbook, but hey, that's just me. In this movie, though, she's bland, she's cold, she's emotionless, and maybe it has more to do with the way she's written and directed, but I was just not on board with this villain at all. And speaking of half-assed, a lot of the makeup work is kinda pathetic. Beast and Nightcrawler still look really good in terms of a makeup job, and in addition to Nicholas Hoult still giving a good performance as Hank McCoy, the transition he makes from just regular old Hank into Beast still looks pretty flawless, although personally I would have liked to see him in full Beast makeup throughout the entire movie and not transition. If Kelsey Grammer could do it in The Last Stand, then Nicholas Hoult could do it in this movie. But when it comes to Jennifer Lawrence, they really just resorted to painting Jennifer Lawrence blue. The makeup is just not as detailed as it was in First Class, Days of Future Past, and Apocalypse. And as for Charles Xavier and Magneto, it's like they never aged. This movie is supposed to take place in 1992, and yet both of them look exactly like they do in X-Men First Class, which took place in 1962, 30 years prior. And you've heard a lot about this movie being delayed and having to go through millions of dollars of reshoots, to the point where they actually had to change the film's ending from a spaceship to a train, all because they didn't want to be too similar to Captain Marvel, which also had its climax take place on a space station. And that's not me spoiling anything, that's been publicized. And in terms of the final battle, it is sloppy. The action scenes are just too choppy. The camera's shaking all over the place. And you can tell that it's being rushed. And I don't know what the deal was. I don't know if it was Fox meddling with this movie once again, like they tend to do with a lot of movies. Or if all these reshoots had something to do with them being acquired by Disney. Whatever the case, it's just not that exciting of a climax. Although I will say this, at least it's not in a subway train, because I hate that cliche in comic book movies, so at least they avoided that. So if I could try to end the movie on some positive notes, I think there are a few moments in this movie, just a few, where they get the spirit of the X-Men down, where these characters feel like their comic book counterparts, but unfortunately they don't last for very long. And I also do think that while this movie as a whole is not a great or even good ending to the Fox X-Men series, there is a nice conclusion between Professor Xavier and Magneto, so at least there's that. But ultimately, this is just an average movie at best. It's not really spectacular, the emotion's not there, there are some weak performances here and there, especially from Jessica Chastain. It's just kind of an underwhelming, I don't want to say disappointment because I didn't have the highest hopes for this movie, but I am sad that this is the last Fox X-Men movie because they had a pretty decent run, all things considered, and I just hate that the series ended on this note. So I would say watch at your own risk. I don't think it's god-awful, but it's definitely underwhelming, and this is not the way I would have ended this series. For me personally, Days of Future Past and Logan were the two perfect send-offs for the Fox X-Men series. And there you go, that's my review for Dark Phoenix. And now I want to know what you guys think about this movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? What's your favorite X-Men movie, counting and not counting the solo Wolverine and Deadpool movies? And who's your favorite mutant? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.